Mother Knows Death, starring Nicole and Jemmy and Maria QK.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Mother Knows Death. Let's get started with the story of the day.
We have really tragic, sad news out of DC last night. This was making me sick when you sent me a text about this. So American Airlines Flight 5342 was headed to DC from Wichita, Kansas, and as they were preparing to land on the runway, a military helicopter somehow was in the same airspace and crashed into the plane, causing it to go into the Potomac River. And unfortunately, at this time, they don't think there's any survivors.
Yeah, I mean, they gave up rescue efforts, it even seems, in the middle of the night because the water is so cold. It's 36 degrees. And first responders were there so fast and they were able to access some of the people. But unfortunately, all of the people that they found were already dead. Not sure exactly what the cause of death is yet at this time because they are going to have to do death investigation and autopsies and everything. And there can be different causes of death for the people. They don't all have to have the same cause of death. But unfortunately, it's just so freaking scary that I just really couldn't believe, because when I first heard the news last night, I was watching TV and I saw all of the fire trucks in DC, right? So I texted Gabe and just said, like, hey, why don't you text your friends, because it looks like there's something happened with a plane. And I just was assuming it was like a little personal plane.
Well, that's how they were first reporting it. They just kept saying small plane. So I'm thinking, private plane, JFK junior level.
Yeah, that's
small
exactly
plane.
what I was thinking too.
But this was a commercial airline with 64 people on board.
Yeah, so that's what, when I said, oh, it came from Wichita and it was American Airlines, I was like, what the fuck? This is an actual commuter plane? Like, what the hell? So, it's crazy because that just doesn't really happen like that. And then when you watch the videos, you just don't understand how it possibly happened, because it just looked pretty clear to everyone else that there was a plane right in front of the helicopter. I just don't understand it, but we don't really know anything right now except that as of right now when we're recording, they have recovered 27 bodies from the airplane and 1 body from the helicopter, and that's all we know. But the plane apparently had 64 people altogether, right? 60 passengers and 4 crew member.
Yeah.
And then the helicopter had an additional 4 people, I believe. So as of this time, they're saying that everyone is presumed dead. I mean, just terrible.
Yeah, so I came across this article from CNN from 2013 that they almost had an identical situation happen with a military helicopter and a commercial airline, but at the last second they were able to realize, and the flight was able to divert and not get hit by the helicopter. So I think there's a lot of controversy about, how this went down. How did this possibly happen? I was listening to some of the air traffic control calls this morning, and it seems like they only realized it seconds before it happened. And then they had to close the airport last night. I don't even think it opened till 11 today. So it's really scary, and they're saying now this is, the deadliest crash since another plane crash that happened right after 9/11, where this commercial airline crashed into a neighborhood in Queens where 265 people died. So 260 people on board and 5 people that were in the neighborhood. It's really sickening when you hear about stuff like
that?
this.
When was
it? Was right after 9/11.
That was such a crazy time. I just don't. I was in the heat of going to school and stuff, and maybe I just wasn't paying attention enough to the news. Just like off the top of my head, I just don't even remember. I remember the one that landed on the Hudson, which was crazy.
That was insane.
But no, I kind of remember it now that I'm thinking about it. But it's the whole entire thing is just nuts, and the aviation accidents are just really messy sometimes. This one, obviously, when we watched the video, you could see there was an explosion, and you could see, now that it's daytime, you could see pictures of the fuselage in the water, and you could see that there's like a giant hole and mangled up area where the impact took place. but then the rest of the plane is pretty intact. And that's why I say that you might not see the same causes of death in people, because from the area of impact, you might see injuries like blunt trauma, and even from the explosion, you would see different injuries there. But then the people on the other end of the plane that was completely intact, they could have still been seatbelted in and submerged underwater, and they could have had a cause of death of drowning or hypothermia because the water was so cold. I mean, honestly, the water was 36 degrees. The water of the Titanic, it was 28. So just think about that. It's not really too far different. And we know how that ended up when people were in the water too long. And it would only take 20 minutes to start feeling hypothermia in that situation. So it's just freaking terrible.
Yeah, now, we're starting to get some identities of people that were on the plane. I don't know if you saw this, but this woman that was on the plane texted her husband and said, "We're landing," I guess through the plane's
everybody
Wi-Fi.
does that. And that's what I was thinking. Like, think about every single time we pick each other up from the airport or something like that, and you say, "Okay, look, I see the ground. I'll be down in 5 minutes. I'll call you to come pick me up when I get my luggage," or something. Like, all those people waiting there, and essentially they saw it all happening right out the window. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's absolutely horrible. Some of the people on board were also, there was Russian figure skaters, world champions. There was also some U.S. members of the figure skating team. So the Olympic Association's been putting out some, just memorials and like kind thoughts about how tragic the loss of these people are, and it's really sad. I mean, the good thing about technology is that we know every single person that was on that plane based on who checked in with their boarding pass, right?
Yeah.
So they know exactly who they're looking for in these accidents.
Yeah, and they know and that's why when they said, I mean, there was a couple things that this is what makes me personally think that there were some people that were just intact and easy to find, because when you see the plane, the tail portion of the plane completely intact like that, it's like the first responders know where to go right away. The bodies are there and they're seatbelted in, and it's very easy for them to go and find them. Whereas if it was because sometimes when you see aviation accidents, they're just so bad, and the crash causes just body parts and stuff to be everywhere. And imagine in the water, like they wouldn't be able to find people as easily. So they might even specifically be able to say, like, they got this one out of this seat and so forth. But they're going to send all the bodies to the medical examiner's office to get identified. And that could be a process depending on how the condition of the bodies. It's just going to take some time. And they probably should do an autopsy on everyone just to see what the cause of death is, especially if their bodies are intact, at least so they could provide death certificates. And of course, there's going to be litigation, obviously. So I guess we'll just keep updated. I guess next time we record next week, it's just going to be way more details. So we'll talk about it some more next week.
Yeah, I think we'll have definitely more details over the next couple weeks. But I mean, investigations like this could take years sometimes to figure out exactly what happened. So it's going to be a while, but it's really sad. It made me really sick to think about. I'm sure people that fly regularly have anxiety about it, even though like plane crashes are pretty rare in the grand scheme of things, but it's unsettling.
Someone put a statistic up that was insane, actually, that said since the last plane crash, which was that one you were talking about, I guess, there's been, and what year was that?
That was 2001.
So it was right after 9/11. So since then, there's been like 150 million flights. Think about that. With besides, a door flying off an airplane or a person getting sucked out a window, like there hasn't been a major incident like that. Which is kind of remarkable if you did the statistics. Like, it's very, very safe to fly.
I think it's important to note too, the last plane crash I was referring to in Queens was just based on the United States. I mean, there was just 2 really bad plane incidents in Russia and South Korea. We didn't even cover those.
Yeah.
Because like there's so many plane stories. I mean, we could turn this show into like a plane accident show at this point. There's so many stories, but to have 3 back to back like that is very, just like, it's very gross to think about. And I don't know. It makes me not want to fly ever again.
Do you think it's sus?
I mean, I think everybody.
You know, Lauren, we were talking to Lauren today. She's all on that shit.
I think that, because of how unbelievable it is that this is truly an accident in today's day and age with all the technology we have, that it's hard not to go into conspiracy theories about it. But I think, like Gabe was saying, there were humans involved, so it just naturally makes error very possible. And
yeah. And that was another thing he said too. He's just like, let's just wait until more information comes out, and we're going to hear that the people on the ground are saying, oh, we knew this was going to happen. We've had near misses before that we didn't even hear about. Like you were talking about earlier, that there was a near miss at, when was that, a couple years
in
ago?
2013.
But like we might not really hear about all, more stuff will come out for sure. But let's get into, we don't really have much in celebrity news, but I thought this story was kind of fun.
No, I think this story is pretty good. So this chick posted on TikTok calling out actors who are in period pieces that have obvious cosmetic procedures, like Botox, fillers, breast implants, things like that. And just saying, if you're gonna, you shouldn't even be making it past the audition, because it totally removes you from the story. And I really agree with this.
But like, how are you going to find an actress that doesn't have all this stuff? It's just kind of like,
well, one particular example, which I am sorry to slam this actress because I think she's a pretty good actress, but there's this chick in 1923. She was also in Landman. Her name's escaping me at the moment, but she has a lot of fillers that are so obvious that you're looking at this woman that's supposed to be in 1923 and you're like, okay, like she looks absolutely nothing like anybody that was alive in 1923. I think every actor for the most part has Botox and fillers and everything, but there are actors that don't have as much, that it's not as obvious. And I think some shows do a really good job with this. Like The Gilded Age is a more recent period piece, and I think most of the main actors in that show have the subtle work done, but it's not as blatantly obvious as other ones.
You know what's kind of interesting, which might be you might not even think that this is relevant, but Gabe, when we were doing our family movie night, he picked Brewster's Millions. Have you ever seen it? It's
No.
like from the 80s. I don't even feel like explaining the plot, but it's an 80s, it's an 80s movie, and Richard Pryor, John Candy. But I noticed that the women in the movie just looked very old, and I know that they're my age, but like now when you look around at people that are 45 years old, like they just don't look that old. They don't have wrinkles, like for the most part, because so many people get Botox and fillers and things like that. Like it's just like that's the way it is right now with all actresses. I mean, and some of them are just so extreme. I mean, people are getting surgeries and stuff, and look at people like J-Lo and Demi Moore and stuff. Like these people they're like 100 years old, and they look like incredible. You know what I mean? Like it's because of all the work they get done. So I think finding an actress like that is unrealistic, but it is interesting though, because that there's actors all the time that they do these extreme things to their bodies to get roles, like gain a lot of weight or lose a lot of weight, or to really fit in the role. And I could see what the girl was saying in the article, basically like you're watching this and you don't really feel like you could get fully immersed because you're like, oh my God, that girl has had a Brazilian butt lift or something,
Well, I think it's more, I think it's unrealistic to not get an actor in today's day and age that doesn't have any work done, but I really am going to stick to my guns about some people definitely go really overboard, and it's extremely obvious that they've had all that work done. So I do think if you're taking the time and all the extra money it takes to make a period authentic television show, and you're making sure the costumes and the props and the hair and the makeup are all extremely accurate, you can't have somebody that very clearly has lip injections. Like, really?
Veneers.
Well, yeah, in veneers, I feel like, you could definitely argue that, but it's not even as blatantly obvious. But I don't know. I think it is kind of stupid when you're taking all the time to make every other component of the show incredibly historically accurate, and then you have this person that looks absolutely nothing like a person at the time, when there are people that exist that could look like that.
But the thing is, to their defense, like how do you really know what a person of the time looked like, especially ones like pre-photograph? Like you kind of don't really know.
Well, you don't, but
I mean, like you, for example, I think that you have really good teeth, and
I don't.
no, you do. Like, because I'm going to explain this. Like, you never had braces, and we never whitened your teeth, and you don't have veneers. So your teeth, like in theory, if you were around in the 17 or 1800s, your teeth would have looked like that. Like, there's people that have nice teeth.
Well, that's why the veneers
I
don't
mean,
bother me as much.
I guess it's different because like we have toothpaste and everything like that, but still, there were people that had nice teeth. It was just like not. It might not have been as common, obviously, because oral healthcare wasn't as much of a thing. But you know what I'm saying? There's also people that were might have been older that didn't have as many wrinkles because you know, skincare and everything's been a thing forever, and there's people that always have been trying to not look older and everything. But I get what you're saying though, like and like a Christy Teigen type that just looks like,
well, that's what I'm talking about.
Nature, like
people like her that have there are
she
people
doesn't
that
even
have,
look like a human being. There's like you, for me, it catches my eye that you just look and you're like, whoa.
like when I look at you, for example, I don't think it's blatantly obvious that you have Botox, right? Like you get
I
it
do.
done.
Thanks, Dr. Dimitri. If anyone lives in the South Jersey, Philadelphia area, please go to a med spa at Rosary because Dr. Dimitri is the best.
So,
but continue. Small plug there for him.
You've been getting injections for give or take 20 years, correct? About that, because
yeah.
Okay. So
but listen, to my defense, I didn't actively seek it out. One day I was 27 years old. And I was working in the hospital, and then one of the pathologists who happens to be like this, she was a little bit older than me, but like a hot chick, right? She was a dermatopathologist, so she did skin too. And she came up to me and she was like, you have a wrinkle in between. She was Polish too, right? Which she looks at me and she's like, because we're part Polish too. And she's like, you have a little wrinkle in between your forehead. You should go get Botox. I'll send you across the street. This is over to dermatology, and they'll do it for free for you. And I was like, okay, thanks. I didn't ever think about it, but okay. And that was when it wasn't just as popular as it. She's like, yeah, they just put an injection in your forehead, and it makes it so you can't. Like as I'm talking about this, my eye is twitching so bad. It's like not a good. It's not a good sales point for Botox. Like my eyes all like
my eye's been twitching
flickering,
for the last 3 months. I can't stop it.
So anyway, side note. So she just said, oh, they just put something in your forehead and it paralyzes your muscle. And the funniest part is, so I go and get it done, and then a couple days later, I was sitting in the office with Andre, who was one of the other PAs, and he was a Russian guy, and he was just like, he was so funny, but like not intentionally funny. And he was like staring at me, and I was like, what are you looking at, dude? And he's like, I don't know, just you look different. And I was like, okay. And I didn't even think about it. Like I forgot that I had the Botox, you know? And he was like, it looks good though. It's just different. But from then on, I was like a hardcore, okay, I'm doing this. But I didn't get it for years though, because I didn't get it the entire time I was pregnant and breastfeeding. So that was like a period of 3.5 years. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I didn't get it at all.
My point is, you're 45 years old. I look at you and you look good and you don't look like you've had work done. I look at some other like celebrities and influencers and stuff that I know for a fact have been open about getting them done, but it's not blatantly obvious. So I think there is a way to go about it where you just get people that aren't like the Chrissy Teigen types that have so overboard had it done. So because when I go to Dr. Dimitri, I'm always just like, I just want like the bare minimum, and I want to look like myself. I don't ever go in there and say like,
I think that's part of the thing is that people go in there with pictures. I want to look like this person. Like, no. You know what I mean? I'm just kind of like, this thing is sagging and like make it go away kind of thing, you know?
And listen, that actress from 1923 is drop dead gorgeous. She is a beautiful woman. She doesn't look like she lives in 1923, and I'm sure there's other actors that could have fulfilled the role. And I'm just using that show as an example because it's the most fresh in my mind. But I think this is a more recent problem because even if you go back to like Deadwood or Mad Men or something, people were getting Botox at that time, but it wasn't as obvious because people weren't going so overboard with it. So you could have these actors that looked pretty authentic to the time
Deadwood
period.
is so good. I fucking love that show.
It's one
All
of
right.
the best shows.
We need to move on because we have a lot of good stories.
But I've said my piece. Don't spend all your time making it authentic if you're not really going to take all the steps.
Freak accidents.
This is truly unbelievable. You thought this story was AI. So at this aquarium in China, they have these aquatic performers who go in tanks and dress like mermaids.
Which they do in our country too. So that wasn't the part that I thought was AI, but continue.
No, the video looks crazy, but this performer's in the tank doing her thing, swimming around, and this giant fish comes over to her and suddenly bites her head.
Like her whole entire head goes in the fish's mouth, and her head snaps in a weird way. So I saw the video on Instagram, but it was late last night, and I didn't have the volume on, and I watched it, and I was like, oh, that's AI, and I scrolled through it, and then Maria sent me an article like, no, this is a real story. I can't even believe it. It's nuts looking.
It's really crazy. It just gets worse because, she was able to quickly free herself, swim to the surface, and then her boss was basically like, get back down there and don't say anything.
It's like Tyra Banks on America's Next Top Model. Like, you smile, even though you have the flu and you're dying, like you go down there and you put a face on.
I rewatched that show in recent years, which that was one of our favorites when, like, added to the list of shows I probably shouldn't have been watching at an inappropriately young age. But that show's really fucked up.
I see clips of it from time to time on Instagram. There's always these clips that are like, oh, this is what women in the 90s were dealing with. And it's just like all of these clips of them saying that people are fat. And they're just like, they're like a size 8.
Yeah, not
just
even. They'll be like a size 4.
Yeah. Like it's so outrageous. It's Janice Dickinson was a big one that was telling people that they were fat all the time.
One time at my internship in New York, one of the fashion editors got a pair of jeans that were a size 4 as a gift, and she threw them in the room and was like, I'm swimming in these. Somebody take them. And I'm like, I would die to be a size 4.
I'd die to be swimming in a size 12.
I know. It's like unbelievable. But yeah, and she was like an assistant editor too, not even a main editor. So I'm like, you're really snobby for your job. But whatever.
I haven't been a size 4 since like 2nd grade, for real. I'm not lying to you. Like that's truth. So all right, we're getting very sidetracked today. So
they gave me $100 and we're like, shut up. And then
so I was trying to find out what kind of fish this is, because this thing isn't like it's like a shark-sized fish. It's a huge fish, but and I couldn't find it. It just said that they have rare fish in this aquarium thing.
Helpful.
But I was trying to see if it had. I don't think it had teeth. It just was crazy that this whole entire thing like engulfed her head and then spit it out quite quickly.
It really just looked like she had a black eye. From the injury, it said she got neck, head, and eye injuries from the bite, but she seemed to be okay.
I think, too, that she was wearing goggles and the thing knocked the goggles off. And I think that the fish, just the goggles pushing against her face is actually probably what cut her face. I totally could see she had neck injuries because it looked like she had whiplash after the thing, like, spit her head out. But, I don't know. Like, I just don't even know what to say about it. You know what I mean? Like, I know you wear glasses too, but I'm a glasses wearer. And when people hit my glasses against my face, it hurts so bad. And I always get a bruise just because of the anatomy. And there's not really much subcutaneous tissue with the hard plastic pushing against your face. So if somebody hits a pair of goggles, it like would bruise you, you know?
Well, your glasses are basically goggles. You only wear like extremely thick ones. So I wear really thin ones, and even if they do hit my face, they're not nearly as painful. But another ridiculous story that happened in Brazil was this OnlyFans model was filming a threesome on a hotel balcony and somehow slipped over the edge and fell to her death.
I don't know how this happened, but so I guess they're going to do an autopsy on the girl to see, because there's just all these questions like, is this really what happened? Because you have two men that are on a balcony and they're having sex with a woman who ends up on the ground.
Well, they also reportedly gave conflicting reports of what happened, so it's not looking good for them. So they're doing an investigation to see if it was truly an accident or if one of them pushed her or something.
Yeah, I mean, they'll look for evidence of sexual assault, but like, I don't know how you would prove that in this kind of case. Like, normally you don't get certain injuries if there's very like rough forced sex and stuff like that, but this woman was an OnlyFans model, and apparently she said that she was doing this threesome.
Well, it was
This
getting
isn't the
filmed,
first-
so they have it on. They have
Yeah,
it recorded.
so and like, if you're having sex with two different guys like that, like, you're gonna get more torn up than you normally do, probably. Like, I don't know about that, but I guess they have like surveillance that they're gonna look at and see if they could figure out what happened. But
I don't
what's-
think they're necessarily looking into if she was sexually assaulted. I think they're seeing if they pushed her over the edge.
well, they want to see if it was a sexual crime or not, though. That's I
Yeah.
mean, you know what I mean? If it was involved with that, I don't know, but it's the sad part is that she has a kid,
Yeah.
and I'm like,
it just seems it's totally unnecessary.
it's just like senseless. And like, what was she like, bent over the side of the edge? Like, they didn't really give many details. I'm just trying to figure out how that even happened.
I really don't know, because like
And
you're
she
saying,
was like dead ass naked on the ground below. Like, no, there's
she
no
might have been wearing some lingerie or something. You don't really know the details of it, but yeah, I'll be interested to see what they find and if they have the entire thing recorded and if they could prove that it was done intentionally or not. Because it's weird that they're giving different stories about what happened, unless they're just really flustered and they can't wrap their head
Also,
around
like,
it.
they could be married. Like, there's a lot of other things that could go on. It's kind of
Well, she had a
embarrassing to say you were
boyfriend.
having a threesome with somebody and they died, or you know what I mean? Like,
She had a boyfriend, but I don't know if he was one of the participants.
I'm saying, like, the guys could have been married and they don't, you know what I mean? Like,
Oh yeah, I don't know. But they're planning on publishing. Well, they were going to plan on publish it, so I guess the police are just going to hold on to that and try to figure out what happened. All right, in Vietnam, this 24-year-old went to his local medical center and complained of swelling, and I don't understand this, but they were loosely monitoring him for 3 weeks and couldn't figure out what was going on. Doesn't that seem like a long time?
Yeah, I couldn't really figure out what happened either, but apparently the guy was drunk and hanging out with his friend and had a chopstick in his nose. I don't know why, and bumped into his friend, and then the chopstick ended up perforating through his nose and like breaking off inside of behind his eye, like within his sinus, like close to his brain.
But he like didn't realize this happened and just realized the next day his eye hurt.
The only thing I could think is that because what happened was it's not an entire chopstick, it's the piece of the chopstick. So maybe he didn't realize that a piece of it pushed up and broke off. So when he pulled it out, he didn't realize it was shorter than it was when he put it up there. That's all I could think of. I just, like, imagine taking care of a patient that's complaining about having eye swelling and pus coming out of the corner of their eye and not knowing, like, this other half of the story and doing imaging and finding that there's a freaking chopstick embedded in their head. It's just nuts.
I guess, like, where I just get confused about this story is that he said he sought treatment seemingly pretty quickly and that he was getting monitored for 3 weeks before they did any scans. Doesn't that just seem like a long time?
This is another possible scenario. Maybe he said at the first healthcare clinic that he had a chopstick up his nose and he bumped into his friend And then maybe when they did an external examination and looked up his nose, they thought, okay, there was some trauma on the inside of the nose. Like, that's why he's feeling this pain. Like, it pushed up too far. Like, if you stick a chopstick in your nose right now, it's eventually going to stop. But if you push it hard enough, it's going to keep going. You know what I mean? So maybe that was it. And they were like, oh, we're just treating this wound. Like, and listen, I feel like if this was not in America, correct?
It was in Vietnam.
Yeah. Like, I just feel like if you went into an emergency room and gave that story, they would probably be like, let's do imaging and see what's happening.
Yeah.
But like sometimes I don't know what's happening at other places, but I'm thinking that could be what it is. And when he kept having symptoms that were, the pain kept being there, and then he started having that weird symptom of pus coming out of the corner of his eye, then they were like, okay, he has an infection, like, let's check this out.
Yeah.
That's the only thing that could happen. And it's crazy because the way that it went up, it's in his sinus, which is normally a sterile spot, right? But because the chopstick it was a dirty, like, used chopstick that he ate with, so it had like food and bacteria from his mouth on it. You're introducing germs that aren't normally there, and it created an infection, and that's where the pus was coming from. But it, like, luckily it didn't disturb his vision at all. It just was like in this weird space of the sinus.
I just, whenever we cover stories like this, when things are, stuck up people's nose or near their brains, I can't understand how they survive it. And it's like, oh, simply he just got surgery and got antibiotics and that was that.
There's a lot of different spaces that you could fit things at just the right angle that you don't hit any vital structures, and this is one.
This episode is brought to you by The Gross Room.
Guys, this is your last chance to go to the Gross Room and have an opportunity and enter our contest to win dinner with Maria and I. We're going to take 2 Gross Room members out to dinner for a night just to talk about gross things or whatever you guys want to talk about, but we're really looking forward to it. But it is for Gross Room members only, so make sure that you sign up if you're not a member already.
Yeah, all you have to do is head over to thegrossroom.com, sign up or log into your existing account, and head over to the Gross Room anniversary post and tell us why you want to come to dinner with us. And we will be announcing winners in 2 days, February 1st.
Yes, I can't wait till we have that all planned out, and it's going to be just such a good dinner that involves a cheese board of some sort.
Yeah,
can't wait
be
for
really
that.
Fun.
All right, awesome. So we'll see you guys in the Gross Room. Guys, let's get into some true crime.
These next 3 stories all have to do with people committing crimes, all for social media. And I feel like this is taking over this section at this point.
It really is.
And it's really just making me concerned. I mean, let's get into it first, and then I'm just going to express my concerns as always. So first, we have a healthcare worker, 19 years old. She's been charged with a felony after posting a video where she was twerking on a disabled person's head.
Yes, and it's just one person. She's on video with multiple patients twerking over their head. Again, a video that I've been seeing on the internet for a week, and I was like, I blew over it because I'm like, that can't be real. That has to be a joke of like some girl doing that, and that's her boyfriend pretending to be disabled right there. Like, I just literally cannot believe this is a real thing. When you watch it, you just can't believe, like, what the hell was going through this person's head. I don't understand.
I don't know. And like many of these other cases too, she's smiling in the mugshot. Do we just have no regard for what's right and wrong anymore?
I don't know what to say. You guys, I'll post the video in the Gross Room so you could see it. It's just it's very weird. I don't understand. Did they interview her and ask her, like, what were you thinking?
So I think
like, what the fuck are people thinking too? Because that's what's most concerning, because like it's like they don't even know it's wrong, because if you post it on social media, of course they're going to be able to find you easily, but I don't even think that she realized that she was doing anything wrong.
Yeah, I mean, it's really concerning, and they believe that she worked in an in-home adult daycare program, so I'm assuming if people are in an adult daycare program, they have, things going on where they obviously can't take care of themselves. They might have cognitive disabilities, and this person is just completely taking advantage of the situation all to get likes. And it is like, what is going through your head that you don't think you're going to get in trouble for this from even your employer, let alone the police department? It's nuts.
I don't I just don't understand. I mean, if she was trying to get known, she did it, I guess, if that's what she was trying to do. I just don't understand.
Yeah, but you look like a complete idiot. It's not like you became this viral TikToker and you made $10 million trying to make all these videos. You're 19 years old. Now you have a possible felony on your hands. You look like a complete
You're ruined
moron.
any chance of you ever working in healthcare again.
Yeah, which
What-
are seemingly pretty good jobs. So what are you doing?
I don't know.
And
Well,
then
we
this,
could say that about all 3 stories in this category today. Like,
yeah, so this next story is in Australia. Police started looking into this influencer after her baby was brought to the hospital. So apparently this chick was online telling her following that this baby had a terminal illness, but it really turns out that she was feeding her pharmaceuticals and just unprescribed drugs and making the baby sick and then filming the baby in distress to make it look like she was ill. And it was all to get followers and donations from the followers.
that's so gross. So what happened when they sent so she brought the baby to the hospital at some point? What, like, were they like, because this is the thing, when you're not in medicine, it's the same thing when we're talking about, remember last episode we were talking about that dad who thought that he grabbed tongs and then he really grabbed the knife and then
Yeah,
tried
like he
to
thinks
pass
he's
off that story.
outsmarting the system.
He thinks he's outsmarting the system, but the system and the people that work in the system know how things work. And if they see a baby presenting in that kind of way, that's just very, like, they already are triggered, like something else is going on here. So what happened when the baby went to the hospital?
I mean, they go to she goes to the hospital and she's trying to just, I guess, play it off like the kid's sick. And, you know, they drug tested the baby and they saw that all these drugs were in the baby's system that were not prescribed to the child. And then when they start investigating it more, they find that the woman was going to all these great lengths to cover up how she was getting the drugs and even using remaining pills from another person's prescription in the household.
So I've never worked in emergency medicine, especially with children, but I believe that that's definitely not just normal protocol to order a drug panel unless,
Well,
like,
the
you
kid
think
must have
something's
been
up.
exhibiting specific
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
symptoms.
Like, they just, if a kid was genuinely sick, they wouldn't be like, okay, let's test to see if this kid's on drugs. Like, it's just unusual. So, I mean, this was her kid,
Yes.
like, she gave birth to,
That's what I'm reading from the article.
and she was making videos for social media, or was the videos just so she could try to get money from the GoFundMe?
She was trying to make it seem like she had a terminally ill child so that she could get sympathy, which is kind of like what that Huxley thing was doing, right? They were using this adoption process to get more followers. So she was using it to build a following and therefore get donations for this falsely sick child. But
Oh
she
my
was really
God.
making the baby sick by giving it these pills that it shouldn't have been taking and then videoing it like it was in distress all the time. But nothing was actually
what kind
wrong
of
with
life
the child.
is this child going to have when she grows up? I mean, she's 1 year old now. She'll be fine because she'll obviously hopefully never be let near this woman again. But when this is like an interesting thing that you're going to notice too with the internet, because, like, if shit like this happened 50 years ago, you might be able to find, like, an old newspaper clipping that said your mom did something horrible. But now it's like, if that kid Google searches the mom's name, like, all of these stories are going to come up.
Well, I
And,
don't
like,
think
how do you feel about that?
I don't think she's going to have custody of this child any longer, I would say. And so the kid's either going to have to go in the care of another family member or
Well, yeah, but still, like, she's still going to grow up and know this happened to her.
Yeah,
You know what I
you
mean?
could say this about any victim of child abuse.
I know. It's just a weird thing to think about, that all of these people that are, kids right now, even the OnlyFans lady that we were just talking about, like, eventually that kid that's a baby right now of hers is going to grow up and be a teenager and start Googling. And, like, when you Google your mom's name, like, that's the story that's coming up about them. I don't know. It's just kind of weird.
Well, she's due in court tomorrow. She's been charged with torture, administering poison, making child exploitation material, and fraud. She raised about 37,000 US dollars via GoFundMe. So I guess they're
No,
trying.
that was Australian dollars, I thought.
No,
But-
$60,000 Australian
Oh,
money.
okay.
Approximately 37,000 US dollars. So I guess we're
It's
just
like that was worth.
yeah. I guess we're just gonna see what happens to her. I mean, people like this 100% go to jail, and I hope this kid ends up in the custody of a person that actually cares for them instead of exploiting them.
You know what I question too? I like all of these people that were donating stuff. I wonder if anybody suspected that this story wasn't real. Because when we talk about, it's funny, I was talking to Laura the other day. Laura's the one with the poop log story that we lost it about a couple weeks ago. But she was telling me, because we were talking about somebody in that episode that faked cancer or something.
Yeah.
So she was telling me that another person that we know faked cancer as well.
Oh my god.
And it's like, it's just when anybody does like they fake a medical thing, when you start asking questions about it or, questioning it at all, then you sit there and say like, okay, that doesn't go along with the story. You know what I mean? Like, I'm surprised that people, because like all of these people that were watching these videos, some person had to be a medical person and just would be like, well, I don't understand, these symptoms are weird or something. You know what I mean?
Honestly, I think a lot of these people get away with this for so long because you're seen as the asshole for questioning it.
Yeah, I mean, that's true.
So I think a lot of times people do have speculations about people that do things like this. And then when they, bring it up to somebody else, they're like, how dare you think that way? Because you really don't want to think that a person is that fucked up to act that way.
We're hearing more and more stories about it, honestly. Like,
listen, this is one of those things that people have been faking illnesses and everything probably since the beginning of time, right? But now it's incredibly...
with your kid, it's fucked up.
Well, because she wasn't just pretending the kid had an illness, she was actually making the child sick.
All right, so the next story, though, is a little bit different because I think it's a person acting like a fucking idiot and just got caught.
Yeah, so
like,
this person
reckless.
Just took their 3-month-old baby and was wiping them on their car windshield, wiping snow off, thinking it would be a funny viral video. And you know what? My husband actually showed me this video before I saw a news story written about it, so I was fully prepared for this to become be in the news, because it's just like, what are you doing? That's a baby. It's cold.
So I posted, which I think is actually interesting, because I posted a video in the gross room a couple weeks ago. And it was this guy who had his son, who was probably about 7 years old, like wrapped up in a million layers of saran wrap really tight with his arms tight, and then pulled it really hard and like let the kid unravel. So I posted it in the gross room to just be like, okay, number one, I just so happened to stumble across this on Instagram. And when I watched it, I was like, oh my God, like, that kid could have positional asphyxia and not be able to expand his rib cage enough to breathe properly. Or the way that he pulled him out and the kid was spinning out of it could have like snapped his freaking neck. It just was so crazy to watch a video of a parent doing something like that. And it like probably it's like an innocent dad doing a dumb thing, not even thinking about it, but like really could have hurt the child. And I feel like that was actually more severe than this guy putting his baby on the windshield to clear the car or whatever. I don't really understand, because in that case of the one I posted in the gross room, it looked like the mother was filming it. Like, why are you okay with your husband doing some dumb shit like that?
Well, in this case, they said there was 2 other females involved too, which one of them was possibly the mother of the baby. I mean, this guy has, as of our research this morning, he has not been arrested, but the police are working with the DA to get a search warrant and an arrest warrant. So I don't know if he's actually going to be arrested or what. I think this could, I'm not surprised this became a news story and got picked up, but I think this is a little more innocent than other actions we have seen.
I think that too. Like, I'm looking at it, I'm just kind of like, okay, I wouldn't put my baby on the windshield to clear off the car, but like it looks like the kid's in a snowsuit.
And it's his back. It's not like they shoved the baby's face on the windshield.
And they're just like, wee, like, I don't know. I don't know. Like, it doesn't, unless I don't know more. Is that the only part of the story? Like, there's no,
I feel like there
if
has to
that's
be
all
more
it
or
is, I'm
something.
just kind of like, this isn't even a story, in my opinion.
Because I feel like you can look at it and definitely be like you just said, okay, like I wouldn't be doing that, right? But whatever. It's not that egregious compared to other stories we have covered on here. But I don't know if there's more to the story or there's more to the video, but it genuinely just seemed like a dad put his baby and was just jokingly wiping the snow off. But I guess at the same time, the police don't think this is funny because you see these other stories of these people doing horrific things with their children for views.
Okay, medical news.
This story is really controversial. So, this woman is suing Lyft after a driver told her she was too big to fit in his car. She claims that when she ordered the car and he got there, he immediately locked his doors, told her she could not come in the car, and that she was too heavy for his tires to handle. And she was fighting back, saying she has fit in smaller cars. And it's been this great debate about who was right or wrong.
What do you think?
I think that Lyft's putting it out as, we don't condone discrimination, and I would agree that you shouldn't discriminate, but I think this is a tricky situation to be in.
Yeah, I don't think that there's a problem with this, honestly. You can't, nobody wants to discriminate against people, but there's like a certain limit that you just have to, if somebody pulls up with a motorcycle and wants to put her on it, you have to say no. Like, it's
Well,
just
it could be a safety issue. I mean,
a safety issue. That's,
and we're not talking about an average plus size person. This woman was almost 500 pounds.
yeah, and I think that his argument with the tires is probably pretty valid because most cars, like an actual sedan kind of car, which was what this is, it wasn't an SUV or anything like that. It was like a smaller Mercedes sedan. They could hold like 850 pounds on the tires and everything, right? So if the guy is already 200 pounds, in theory, it probably would have been fine, but it's his car, okay? That's his vehicle. He's not driving a taxi cab that he doesn't own or something. Like, that's his vehicle. So I feel like, what if you pick up a person that's like soaked in piss? You can't say you can't come in my car.
Well, that's where I was going to get at, because there is a level of like, you are a human and you have a right to deny somebody, and he wasn't being in my opinion, watching the video, I don't think he was being an asshole about it. I think he was being extremely apologetic. He told her to order a larger car. I think, people are going to take it as him being an asshole because he obviously didn't take her in the car and he was saying you're too heavy for my tires and everything. But I don't really see a problem with it necessarily.
I'm going to tell you an easy way around this for every Uber and Lyft driver that's listening. All you got to say is, if you don't fucking put a seatbelt on in my car, you're not getting in my car. There's no way that chick could put a seatbelt on. Therefore, I don't want you in there. You know why? Because if there's an accident, she becomes a projectile. And I sure as fuck don't want a 500-pound person getting pushed into me in a car accident because they're not restrained in the car seat. Like, and that should be a rule with Lyft and Uber, that you can't go in the car if you can't buckle the seatbelts. If that's what the driver feels safe with, that's the biggest reason why you want people to wear seatbelts, because they fly around the car in an accident. It's end of story. It's just a safety issue. And it's a bait thing for some of these people. Like, she wants to be able to be like, oh, I'm suing you for discrimination and making a big deal out of it. It's the same time when people of that size go on an airplane and try to like say they should get the seats for free and shit. Like, you're starting trouble and it's going to be trouble.
I don't understand why Lyft is liable, because as far as I understand it, those drivers are independent contractors. So if you're going to go after somebody, go after the driver. I don't see how Lyft as a company is liable for a drive. Let's say he pulled up and he just, for no reason at all, was like, I'm not picking you up, and she wanted to say it was discrimination. I don't understand how that's a company's fault, regardless of the weight issue or not.
The company should have, like I just was saying about the seatbelt situation, it should just be a policy that's like, it's up to the prerogative of the driver if they feel comfortable having a person that can't be restrained in the car.
But also, like,
It's just a safety issue.
it's a safety issue, and like, if you don't want to pick up a person, like you're saying, covered in piss or covered in vomit or something, that could be seen as discrimination as well. So
Yeah, and like, I mean, if I was a Lyft driver, if there was anybody that I was like, for whatever reason, I don't want this person in my car, I should have the right to be like, I'm not picking you up. You could think it's discrimination all you want, but like, when you're talking about a person's individual safety and property, which is their car, like let's say, for example, she got in the car and it fucked the car up or something like that, then what? Like, is Lyft going to pay for that? Probably not. The damage for that, like, you should just have the ability to say that. I think that this is all it's just all a show. But the problem is that they're going to give her money to make her go away, and that just pisses me off because it just perpetuates this behavior. That's, listen, like, there's I feel bad that she's that heavy. It's the same thing as being in a wheelchair, right? But like, every single place in the world can't accommodate a person in a wheelchair. Most people try to as much as possible, but like, some places can't, and you just can't get upset about that. Like, the whole world functions for the whole population, not just for a specific circumstance. It's not like you're turning down 500-pound people all the time,
even if the driver was being a complete asshole about the situation, I think he's in a lose-lose because, like you said, if he let her into the car, there could be a major safety risk. And if he did exactly what he did, it could be seen the other way. So I don't know. Like, I definitely don't think the drivers should be discriminating in general. Like, if you're a woman and the driver comes in and is like, I'm not taking you because you're a woman, that's one thing. But like, this, as you put it so simply, is just a matter of a safety problem. So, all right, let's talk about this next case going back to 2021. So, this 29-year-old girl felt a crack in her neck after this personal training session at the gym. She went to the hospital, got a CT scan. They recommended a spinal tap to eliminate the possibility of a hemorrhage, but she ended up declining and seeking treatment with a chiropractor. So, what happened from there?
So, I don't know exactly why they wanted to do a spinal tap, and that was their first way to diagnose her with any kind of an issue, but that was whatever. She declined medical treatment, apparently, went to a chiropractor, and when she went to the chiropractor, he did a manipulation with her neck, which they would typically do, and then she ended up, what happened afterwards, because she ended up dying from this chiropractor manipulation. And when they did an autopsy on her afterwards and they figured out what happened was, when she was doing the first physical therapy treatment that caused the initial injury, she was doing some kind of exercise with her neck. She tore a vessel in her neck, an artery that caused a dissection. So the inside of the artery can tear, and the blood that's inside of the lumen, or the inside of the artery, could start making a track in between the inner layer of the artery and the middle layer of the artery, which creates a false track, which could then cause the artery to rupture and kill a person. But it also, if it doesn't do that right away, it just causes it to be painful, and the vessel is at risk of bursting at any time. And so then when she went to the hospital and denied the treatment, which, even if they did a spinal tap, they wouldn't have been able to see that. This is why I'm saying I don't know why that was the choice. So she left and then went back. And then when she went back, he did manipulation on her neck, and that gave her another tear in her artery right there.
The chiropractor.
And then this increases the risk of a stroke, and she ended up having a stroke, and then she died. So when they do the autopsy, they find out that she had these dissections in her arteries, which caused her to have a stroke. But also, they determined that she had this underlying connective tissue disorder called, they didn't say what it was, but I'm going to say that it was probably Ehlers-Danlos, based upon what they said, that she had this underlying connective tissue disorder that wasn't diagnosed. And when people have that disorder, and she had this as well. She had a history of hyperflexible joints and migraines. And when people have this disorder, their connective tissue, which is the tissue that's all over your body, so it's your skin, it could be in your joints, everything is like extra stretchy. So have you ever seen on like Instagram videos or something of these people that like can grab their skin and like stretch it out really far, or they could bend their joints like crazy ways? So
We have a case of it in the book.
yeah, we do, definitely. So Ehlers-Danlos is a group of connective tissue disorders, but sometimes people with this disorder can have problems with their blood vessels that could cause them to be in an increased risk of dissection. So a person that, let's say, for example, if you walk into a chiropractor and tell them that you have this, they wouldn't touch you, right? Because they're scared of something like that happening, because these tears in the vessels and the aorta too, it could happen with minimal to no trauma. So her just getting her neck cracked at the chiropractor caused it, right?
Mm-hmm.
I guess with this lawsuit, they're saying that he should have like asked for her records from the hospital before doing manipulation on her or something.
I think the argument now is going forward, they want to make sure chiropractors are getting previous medical information, whereas before it was not mandatory.
It doesn't matter. Like, as far as everything I read, like, what's the difference? Like, the hospital didn't know she was having a dissection, and the hospital didn't know she had Ehlers-Danlos. So what's the difference? This is just like...
Because they're just looking for somebody to blame.
I mean, that's all I can't really see... If they knew she had this is a whole other thing. But, like, she didn't even know she had it.
Do you think, though, in general, take away this case, that chiropractors should be getting everybody's medical history before doing stuff on them?
I think that they are. I mean, most doctors, if you recently went to a chiropractor, right? Like, do you fill out a health form of all your different things that are wrong with you and stuff? It's not like you just walk in and they start doing shit.
Well, you fill out
doctors
a form.
too. They're doctors too. Like
they're doctors too, and you fill out a form. But I guess the argument in this case is that they want you to request the actual medical document.
That is fucking ridiculous. They are doctors. Chiropractors are doctors. They're allowed to, like, they ask the questions they need to know in order to treat patients. They shouldn't have to get, like, that's just the most outrageous thing I've ever heard in my life.
Let me tell you too, side note, like, getting your neck cracked, this is like a weird thing, but like just in general, getting your neck cracked is so scary to me. It's just the sounds it makes is just uncomfortable. And I just always think of
I've
some
never done
thing.
it, so I'm just curious. Like,
it feels good, but the sounds are horrible.
Terrifying. But they go to school and learn how to do that. It's like all they learn, you know what I mean? They learn anatomy, they learn not to hurt people and stuff. This, to me, is just like a freak thing. How the hell did... it's... I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe I am missing part of the story or something. From what I read, I'm just kind of like, yeah, if you got... The hospital clearly didn't know she was having that, because you don't let a patient that's having an arterial dissection leave, even if they want to leave. Like, they're going to die, right? Like,
yeah,
they didn't do any of that. She thought she just had a neck pain, I don't know. Okay. Other death news.
All right. Thank you to Clota for sending this, and especially with your notes, because it was very helpful in understanding this case. So back in 2022, this person who studies aging, do you want to say this? Because I was trying to look up the gerontologist.
I don't even have it, because whatever I wrote, it changed it to dermatologist. I don't know. It's some person that studies aging. So let's just say that.
Another boomer thing you do is talk to text notes. Side note,
because I'm reading an article, it's just easier to just do that.
All right, so
I absolutely do not do talk to text and text messages ever. The only time I literally,
when you're writing and when you're doing
only
notes.
when I'm doing notes for stuff I do, because it's quicker because we were talking about this earlier, that I didn't learn how to type properly. It's just, I have ideas that come in my head really fast, and it's just easier for me to say them out loud than to write them, because then I forget them. Anyway, continue.
Well, not a dermatologist.
I'm not a boomer. I'm not
You're
even
Gen X.
I'm barely Gen X even. I'm almost a millennial by like 1 year, by the way.
We're almost the same generation, which is kind of nuts to think about. Okay. Back in 2022, a gerontologist, a person who studies aging, was researching the oldest people in Ireland and came across this case of a guy who was 110 years old. So there are many attempts for this guy to visit this 110-year-old man.
This freak of nature living in that's 110, the oldest person living in Ireland.
Yeah, so there's many attempts to visit this 110-year-old man, but the family kept making up excuses why it couldn't happen. So finally, one day in April of 2022, welfare officers headed to the house, and this older woman answered the door and said her father-in-law, who was the 110-year-old man, didn't want to be disturbed. So they kept pushing, and eventually she brings them in the house and brings them to a man wearing shoes laying in a bed. And when they start looking at this man in the bed, they're like, this is clearly not a 110-year-old. It is clearly a younger person because it was her husband. So she ended up getting arrested because...
Could you imagine, like, the poor husband was, like, probably sitting there watching TV, and then the wife just goes up to him and, like, go in bed right now. Like, I know you still have your shoes on and everything. You got to go pretend to be dead. And, like, him being like, what? Yeah. Like, imagine this conversation taking place. It's kind of amazing.
I can't, but it was apparently the scheme of the century because for 28 and a half years, this woman was claiming her dead father-in-law's pension. She started getting it, I guess, because she was his caregiver and she was allowed to take it out, which also sounds suspicious, but that's according to her, that she was given permission to take it out. And then he died at some point and she just kept taking it out for decades after his death. So they're sitting there thinking this guy's 110 years old, but he had been dead since the 90s, and she had just been taking out his pension all this time.
But where was his body? Like, I mean, he was declared dead and had, like, his body was properly disposed of, right? Like, he went to a funeral home or whatever and had all that done. Like, where's his body then?
So that's what I'm kind of unclear about. Like, we do have stories sometimes, though. We just had that one last week of that family living with their dead grandpa or uncle or something and coming and going and taking the house, right? So
yeah, but the person was dead there. Like, I'm just wondering, because usually if you die and then you go to a funeral home and they submit all their things, like we were talking about, remember we were saying that a couple weeks ago or a week ago that we were talking about that one girl that her social security number got mistakenly entered as a person that died at a funeral home and she was having all those problems. So if this guy died and had a funeral and everything like that, then wouldn't his information have gotten submitted that he died and should no longer be receiving the pension checks? You know what I mean? There's some kind of like a disparity there with...
Well, I'm thinking that didn't happen. Or he died naturally. Possibly he died naturally and they took care of it and then continued taking it.
I mean, that would make the most sense. I don't think that I read anything about that, though. They didn't really say, like, how she got away with this kind of.
Unless it was like he did go through and have a proper funeral and everything, and she just kept taking the pension out and nobody stopped it because of a clerical error.
Yeah, that's totally possible, too.
So I think it was probably that, because I think if they figured out they got rid of a body or something, it would have been a bigger deal and a bigger jail sentence. So she got sentenced to 2 years in jail, but she only served 6 weeks and is already out. So she is said to have defrauded approximately $282,000. That is a lot of money, and she had been taking it out from December 1993 until she got caught in 2022.
So does she have to pay it back or anything, or like they didn't say?
I think she's working on a way to pay them back, but how are you possibly going to pay that back? She's in her 70s.
Oh my God.
It's absolutely ridiculous.
It is.
Thanks, Clodagh, for sending this.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for looking out, Clodagh. Do you want to give Clodagh's podcast a shout out, Maria?
Yeah, Clodagh is the most awesome reporter for Sunday World. She also works on a podcast called Crime World that's really awesome. There's actually a great episode with you. You were interviewed at CrimeCon for it.
Yeah, that was fun.
Thanks, girl. That was an awesome story.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to questions of the day. Every Friday at the @MotherKnowsDeath Instagram account, we have a little question box on the stories. You guys can ask whatever you want. Thank you for not asking any ghost questions this week, by the way. First, is it common to get a body from the OR or labor and delivery?
I would say it's not common. I've gotten more bodies from the OR than from labor and delivery. I've actually never I've gotten fetal and baby bodies from the labor and delivery, but not women.
Not yeah.
I told you I did a pregnant woman once, but she was already dead when she got to the hospital. But OR, yeah, unfortunately, just a few times. It's not anything alarming, but there were a couple mistakes, and we got the bodies from the OR. Yes.
All right. Why would an autopsy require the brain to be examined when the cause of death is stomach related?
So we, for the most part, a lot of times, like, they're just going to take out all the organs just to have a full picture of what was going on with a person. So, especially in academic centers, they will just take out all of the organs just so they can examine them. And especially if you're giving permission for the autopsy and say, we could do a full autopsy, sometimes we're going to do that just for purposes of medical students that are there and learning and residents, pathology residents and stuff like that. So, in general, is it really necessary? I don't know, because I don't know. You're saying stomach issues, and I'm not sure exactly what that could be. But for example, if you thought your family member died from something stomach related, they could have seen something else inside, which may make them think that there was something else going on. So a lot of times people think that there's stomach pathology, but they might be having like an aortic aneurysm or something, and then they would want to check the vessels, they would want to check the heart, and they like checking the cardiovascular system too, and just to see, because a lot of times a lot of that stuff is related, strokes, heart attacks, things like that. So I'm not really sure. Like, if you're telling me exactly, okay, the person had stomach cancer, why would they want to look at their brain? It's not necessarily necessary, but they also might want to look for a metastasis or something. It just depends on like where the autopsy is getting done and stuff. So if you did have an autopsy on your family member that died, I'm sorry to hear that, by the way, but if they did look at the brain, I wouldn't think that that was suspicious at all.
Well, if you work at one of like the hospital you worked at was a university hospital, so would they, if they were trying to teach students or something?
Yeah, I mean, we always did, but in the hospital, the way the permission form is filled out, it's just like, do you give us permission to do a full autopsy? And if the person says yes, then we just take everything out. Like, even if we find the cause, okay, this person had, a ruptured aneurysm or something like that, we would still take everything out just because they gave us permission to. And we use it to, we just use it to study with, even in the private hospital, there's nurses and stuff. We just use it for anatomy purposes and teaching. So I just don't think it's weird. That's just like a part of the protocol, kind of.
All right, last. Do you find it difficult to separate emotions from the stories you cover?
No, I mean, not really. I'm just kind of like wired like that because of the job that I did for so long. But no, some stories bother the hell out of me. You know what I mean? Especially when they're mostly related to like my current life. When it has to do. This was a story we actually didn't even cover because I try not to talk about. We try not to cover stories that are just like. I mean, it's kind of impossible on this podcast, but some of them are just like extra terrible. And I don't even know if I talked to you about this, Maria, but there was a story last week about a kid in like second grade that the parent was dropping them off at school and their coat like got caught in the car in the drop off line and the kid got like ran over and killed.
I saw that.
And like, I can't even like, I don't even want to talk about that shit. It's just so freaking upsetting on so many levels. And you just think like, God, what if something like that happened at our school or just, things like that. And I covered another story in the gross room this week of a case that someone had sent me the video, but it was old, like 10 years old. I don't know if you saw it, but it was a bus driver who let a kid off the bus and the kid's backpack got caught in between the doors when it shut and the bus driver drove away with the kid like attached to the bus for like blocks and blocks and blocks and didn't realize that the kid was hanging from the bus. It was like so disturbing. And the kid lived, luckily. She's probably close to your age, or she's, you know what I mean? She's older because this happened a while ago. But yeah, just like really, really upset. I get upset when anything has to do with kids all the time. You know what I mean? Or firefighters too. Just like things that it's hard for me to like turn off. Like those, sometimes I see commercials for like these organizations that support firefighters, especially like military and firefighters that die in the line of duty, and they like buy them a house and stuff. You know that organization, and I just like I have to like tune it out because I'm just like this is like a little too close, you know.
Well, I think, well, we're picking all the stories we're covering, and not all of them are obviously easy to talk about. And one in particular we cut out in the last couple of months was that woman in France where she was just getting raped by all these people. Her husband was like setting it up. I just didn't want to cover that one. Because stories
Well,
like
we
that
also-
are just
we-
too dark.
Yeah, and we also only have so much time. I mean, maybe if there's a possibility in the future of us having more time that we could do like an extra episode a week or something, but we only could cover so many stories. We cut out so many every day, you know.
And I feel like you guys probably appreciate some of the more outrageous ones at times just because they're a little easier to digest. It doesn't necessarily mean they're not as fucked up or heavy, but they're easier to digest. And you know, I think about how hard it is to be a news anchor and be live on air and have a breaking news story and then try to process that. I believe when I was reading Katie Couric's memoir that, if I'm remembering this correctly, I believe she said she was live on air during 9/11.
She was, because I watched it. Like,
And-
I was watching it.
And like immediately
After
she
I
was
came
just
home.
like, I have to get to my kids. You know, you can't even, if you're in that process and you're a mother, like how are you even doing your job when something like that's
Yeah.
happening and your kids aren't with you?
Yeah.
So I try to think about things like that. And, you know, when people cry on air sometimes, I think people think it's really unprofessional, but like think about all the really heavy things you have to hear in a day. Sometimes certain things just crack you. We definitely have stories on here that are really difficult to talk about, but I guess for us, it's like we have the barrier of picking the stories ourselves, covering it in the way we want to, doing the notes ahead of time to kind of prepare for it. And then you
Yeah.
just go from there.
Yeah.
So you know, I think with our jobs, it's like I really try to balance my day out with really light things afterwards because like I can't stop working for the day and then just watch the news all night long. I would be miserable and depressed if that's all I heard all day long. So I really try to balance out the rest of my day, like reading a stupid book or watching Housewives or just doing something that's the complete opposite to take my mind away from it. But it's not easy all the time.
I'm different. I just like death and destruction all the time.
Yeah, you just-
24/7.
You're the most negative person I know. I'm just kidding. I'm quoting Pop-Up when he yelled at me that one time. Which was a shock to the system. Okay. If you guys have a shocking story, please submit it to stories@motherknowsdeath.com, or if you find a cool story, you could always DM it to us on Instagram, although we know we don't always get them, so the email would be preferred. But thank you guys so much. We'll see you next week.
See you next week. Thank you for listening to Mother Knows Death. As a reminder, my training is as a pathologist assistant. I have a master's level education and specialize in anatomy and pathology education. I am not a doctor and I have not diagnosed or treated anyone, dead or alive, without the assistance of a licensed medical doctor. This show, my website, and social media accounts are designed to educate and inform people based on my experience working in pathology so they can make healthier decisions regarding their life and well-being. Always remember that science is changing every day, and the opinions expressed in this episode are based on my knowledge of those subjects at the time of publication. If you are having a medical problem, have a medical question, or are having a medical emergency, please contact your physician or visit an urgent care center, emergency room, or hospital. Please rate, review, and subscribe to Mother Knows Death on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or anywhere you get podcasts. Thanks.